They abandoned a poor girl in a sack to die, but the cowboy's daughter whispered, "Papa, she's Mama." The autumn sun filtered through the canopy of golden leaves, casting dancing shadows across the narrow dirt road that wound through the Montana wilderness. Jake Morrison rode his bay mare slowly, his 7-year-old daughter Lily perched in front of him, her small hands gripping the saddle horn with the confidence of a child who had spent more hours on horseback than on her own 2 feet. They had been checking the northern fence line of the ranch, a weekly ritual that Jake had turned into quality time with his daughter since her mother's death 3 years ago. The loss of Rebecca had hollowed out something in Jake's chest that he didn't think would ever fully heal, leaving him to raise Lily alone in a world that suddenly seemed far harsher than it had before. Lily was chattering about the foal that had been born the previous week, her voice bright with excitement as she described its wobbly legs and soft nose, when suddenly she stopped mid-sentence. Her small body went rigid, and she pointed ahead to something on the side of the road that Jake's eyes, focused on the distant tree line, had missed. "Papa, what's that?" Her voice had changed, losing its childish excitement and taking on a note of concern that made Jake's protective instincts flare immediately. Jake pulled the mare to a stop and followed his daughter's pointing finger. At first, he thought it was just a discarded pile of old burlap, the kind of trash that sometimes appeared along the road left by passing travelers with no regard for the land. But as his eyes adjusted and focused, he saw something that made his blood run cold. The burlap was moving, just slightly, a barely perceptible shift that spoke of something alive inside. Without a word, Jake swung down from the saddle, lifting Lily down after him with practiced ease. "Stay with the horse, Lily," he instructed, his voice firm but not unkind. He had learned in the years since Rebecca's death that sheltering Lily completely from the world's hardships did her no favors, but he still tried to shield her from the worst of it when he could. He approached the burlap sack cautiously, his hand instinctively moving to the knife at his belt. In this part of Montana, you never knew what you might find, and caution had kept him alive through more than one dangerous situation. As he knelt beside the sack, Jake could hear shallow, labored breathing coming from inside. His fingers worked quickly at the rope that bound the top of the sack, and when he finally pulled it open, what he saw made him inhale sharply. Inside was a young woman, probably no more than 19 or 20, curled into a fetal position. Her clothes were torn and filthy, her long dark hair matted with dirt and what looked like dried blood. Her face was bruised, one eye swollen shut, and her lips were cracked and bleeding. But what struck Jake most forcefully was how much she looked like Rebecca. The resemblance wasn't exact, but something about the shape of her face, the arch of her eyebrows, the way her hair fell even in its current state, sent a jolt of recognition through him that felt like touching a live wire. "Dear God," Jake breathed, his hands already moving to check for a pulse. It was there, weak and thready, but present. The woman was alive, barely. She was burning with fever, her skin hot to the touch even in the cool autumn air. He could see bruises around her throat, suggesting she had been strangled or choked, and there were rope burns on her wrists that spoke of prolonged restraint. Someone had done this to her deliberately, had beaten her, tied her up, and left her here to die like a piece of unwanted trash. The cruelty of it made Jake's jaw clench with rage. Behind him, he heard Lily's footsteps on the leaf-covered ground despite his instruction to stay with the horse. He should have known better. Lily had inherited her mother's stubborn streak along with her gentle heart. "Papa, is she okay?" Lily's voice was small and frightened, but when Jake turned to warn her away, he saw his daughter's face had gone pale, her blue eyes wide with something that looked like recognition. "Lily, go back to," Jake started, but Lily wasn't listening. She had moved closer, staring down at the unconscious woman with an intensity that was unsettling in a child so young. Lily dropped to her knees beside the woman, her small hand reaching out to touch the woman's matted hair with a gentleness that made Jake's throat tighten. Then Lily looked up at her father, and there were tears streaming down her face, her expression a mixture of hope and confusion, and something that looked almost like joy. "Papa," Lily whispered, her voice trembling with emotion. "She's Mama." The words hit Jake like a physical blow. For a moment he couldn't breathe, couldn't think, couldn't do anything but stare at his daughter in shock. "Lily, no," he said gently, his heart breaking at the hope he saw in her eyes. "Baby, this isn't your mama is gone. We buried her 3 years ago. This is just *. They abandoned a poor girl in a sack to die," but the cowboy's daughter whispered, "Papa, she's mama." The autumn wind carried the scent of dying leaves and approaching winter through the valley as Jackson Cole guided his horse along the narrow forest path that led back to his ranch. His 6-year-old daughter, Lily, sat in front of him in the saddle, her small hands clutching the horn as she chatted excitedly about the supplies they'd purchased in town. It had been a good day, one of those rare peaceful moments that Jackson treasured more than gold. The sun was beginning its descent, painting the forest in shades of amber and gold, and the world seemed almost perfect in its tranquility. But Jackson had lived long enough to know that peace was often just the calm before a storm, and this particular storm was about to change his life in ways he could never have imagined. Lily suddenly went quiet, her small body tensing in a way that immediately put Jackson on alert. The girl had inherited her mother's intuition, that sixth sense that could detect when something wasn't right. Jackson had learned to trust his daughter's instincts over the past 3 years, since his wife Margaret had died giving birth to their second child, a son who had lived only 3 days before following his mother into death. Those dark days had nearly destroyed Jackson, leaving him a hollow shell of a man trying desperately to be both father and mother to a grieving little girl who asked every night when Mama was coming home. "Papa," Lily whispered, her voice trembling in a way that made Jackson's protective instincts flare immediately. "Papa, there's something in the road, something moving." She pointed ahead with a shaking finger, and Jackson felt his blood run cold as he saw what had caught her attention. There, partially hidden by fallen leaves and evening shadows, was a large burlap sack, and it was indeed moving, twisting and writhing, as if something inside was trying desperately to escape. Jackson's first thought was that it might be an animal, perhaps a wildcat or coyote that someone had trapped and abandoned. Such cruelty wasn't uncommon in these parts, where life was hard and compassion often seemed like a luxury people couldn't afford. He dismounted carefully, lifting Lily down and instructing her to stay by the horse. "Don't move from this spot, understand? Whatever's in that sack might be dangerous." His hand moved instinctively to the revolver at his hip as he approached the writhing bundle, every sense on high alert. The sounds coming from inside the sack made Jackson's heart nearly stop. They weren't animal sounds, they were human, muffled, desperate, the unmistakable sound of someone trying to breathe through fabric, trying to scream through what must be a gag. Jackson's hands moved with practiced efficiency, pulling his knife from his belt and slicing through the rough twine that bound the sack closed. What he found inside made his stomach turn and his rage ignite in a way it hadn't since he'd buried his wife. It was a young woman, probably no older than 22 or 23, bound hand and foot with coarse rope that had cut into her flesh, leaving angry red marks that spoke of hours of struggle. A dirty cloth was tied around her mouth as a gag, and her eyes, when they met Jackson's, were wild with terror and the expectation of more pain. She was dressed in what had once been a decent traveling dress, now torn and filthy, and Jackson could see bruises forming on her exposed skin. Someone had done this deliberately, had tied her up like garbage and left her here to die, either from exposure or from whatever predator might find her first. "It's all right," Jackson said softly, the way he'd speak to a frightened horse. "I'm going to help you. I'm not going to hurt you. Just stay still while I cut these ropes." His hands were steady as he worked, years of ranch work having taught him to remain calm in a crisis, but inside he was seething. What kind of monsters would do this to another human being? The woman flinched when he touched her, and Jackson could see the terror in her eyes, the absolute certainty that more pain was coming. It made him wonder what she'd already endured, what horrors had brought her to this abandoned road in a sack. He cut the gag away first, and the woman gasped for air, her chest heaving as she filled her lungs. "Please," she whispered, her voice hoarse and broken, "please don't hurt me anymore. Please just let me die. I can't take any more." The words were like a knife to Jackson's heart. She wasn't asking for rescue. She was begging for death, convinced that whatever came next would be worse than just giving up. "Nobody's going to hurt you," Jackson said firmly, cutting the ropes from her wrists and ankles. "You're safe now. I'm Jackson Cole, and I'm going to take you to my ranch where you can get warm and cleaned up and have something to eat. Can you tell me your name? Can you tell me who did this to you?" He tried to keep his voice gentle, but the anger was there, simmering just below the surface. Someone was going to answer for this. Someone was going to pay. The woman just shook her head, tears streaming down her dirty face. She tried to stand, but her legs wouldn't hold her, whether from being bound too long or from sheer exhaustion. Jackson couldn't tell. He caught her before she fell, steadying her with hands that were surprisingly gentle for such a big man. "Easy now, don't try to move too fast. How long were you in that sack?" But the woman just kept crying, great shuddering sobs that shook her entire frame. It was then that Lily disobeyed her father's order to stay by the horse. The little girl came running forward, her face a mask of concern that was far too adult for someone so young. She had seen too much hardship in her short life, had learned too early that the world could be cruel and unfair. But she had also learned compassion, had inherited her mother's soft heart along with her intuition. Lily stopped a few feet away, studying the crying woman with eyes that seemed to see far more than a 6-year-old should. Jackson was about to scold his daughter for not staying put when Lily did something that made the world tilt on its axis. She walked right up to the frightened woman, reached out with her small hand, and gently touched the woman's tear-stained cheek. "Don't cry," Lily said softly. "Papa's good. He won't hurt you. He didn't hurt me when Mama died. He just held me and said everything would be okay, even when it wasn't. He's the best papa in the whole world." The woman looked down at Lily, and something shifted in her expression. The terror receded slightly, replaced by confusion and a fragile hope. She stared at the little girl as if seeing a ghost, her eyes widening in a way that made Jackson feel uneasy. There was recognition there, or something like it, though how this woman could know his daughter Jackson couldn't fathom. Then Lily spoke the words that would echo in Jackson's mind for the rest of his life. The little girl tilted her head, studying the woman's face with a concentration that seemed almost eerie, and then she turned to her father with absolute certainty shining in her young eyes. "Papa," Lily whispered, her voice filled with wonder and something that sounded almost like relief. "Papa, she's Mama. This is Mama come back to us. I knew she would. I knew she wouldn't stay gone forever." The silence that followed was deafening. Jackson felt like he'd been punched in the chest, all the air leaving his lungs in a rush. "Lily, sweetheart, that's not. This isn't your Mama. Your Mama died, baby. You know that. We buried her under the oak tree, remember? This is just a woman who needs help. She's not Mama." Even as he said the words, trying to be gentle, trying to protect his daughter from the cruelty of false hope, Jackson felt something crack inside him. Lily had been so young when Margaret died, only 3 years old. She barely remembered her mother, except through the stories Jackson told and the one faded photograph he kept on the mantel. But Lily was insistent, shaking her head with the stubborn certainty that only a child can possess. "She is, Papa, I know she is. She has Mama's eyes, see, they're the same color like the sky before a storm, and she has Mama's hands. Long fingers like Mama used to play piano with, and she needs help like Mama needed help when she was having the baby. We have to take her home, Papa. We have to take Mama home." The woman was staring at Lily with an expression Jackson couldn't read, tears still streaming down her face, but something else there now too. She reached out a trembling hand toward the little girl, and Lily immediately grabbed it, holding on as if she could keep this stranger from disappearing the way her real mother had. "You're beautiful," the woman whispered, her voice breaking. "So beautiful and kind, just like an angel. What's your name, little one?" "Lily Margaret Cole," the girl announced proudly. "I'm 6 years old, and I live on a ranch with Papa and our horses and cows and chickens. I help Papa with everything because Mama's not here to help anymore. But now you're here, and you can help instead. Papa gets lonely. I hear him crying sometimes at night when he thinks I'm asleep." But he won't be lonely anymore if you come home with us. Jackson felt his heart breaking and mending simultaneously. He hadn't realized Lily knew about his nighttime grief, the way he sometimes sat in the dark and mourned the life he'd lost, the wife he'd loved, the future that had been stolen from them. He tried so hard to be strong for Lily, to never let her see his pain, but children saw everything, understood more than adults gave them credit for. "Lily's right about one thing," Jackson said, clearing his throat and trying to regain his composure. "You need help and you need it now. I don't know what happened to you or who hurt you, but you're not spending the night out here. My ranch is about 3 miles north. We have a spare room, and my housekeeper Mrs. Chen is there. She can help you get cleaned up and tended to. Then we'll figure out what to do next, how to find whoever did this to you and make sure they face justice." The woman looked between Jackson and Lily, and slowly, so slowly, she nodded. "Thank you," she whispered. "I don't deserve kindness, not after everything, but I don't want to die out here alone. I thought I did, but seeing her, seeing your daughter, I want to live. I want to at least try." Her voice was raw with emotion, and Jackson found himself wondering what story lay behind those words. What had happened to make this woman believe she deserved to be left in a sack to die? Getting the woman onto Jackson's horse was a challenge. She was weak from whatever ordeal she'd endured, and her legs kept threatening to give out. Jackson ended up lifting her into the saddle as if she weighed nothing, then climbing up behind her while Lily rode in front. The little girl insisted on holding the woman's hand the entire ride home, chattering non-stop about the ranch, about her room, about how she'd teach the woman to feed the chickens and gather eggs, and all the important things a person needed to know. The woman listened to Lily's innocent chatter with an expression of wonder mixed with grief, and Jackson found himself studying her more closely as they rode. She was beautiful beneath the dirt and bruises, with delicate features and those storm-gray eyes that Lily had mentioned. Her hair, matted and tangled now, appeared to be a rich auburn color, and her hands, though rough and cut from the ropes, did have long, elegant fingers. But she wasn't Margaret. His wife had been dark-haired and shorter, with green eyes and a laugh that could light up a room. This woman was a stranger, nothing more.